Welcome to Company Spotlight with Chris Temple, editor and publisher of the National Investor. Now in his fifth decade in the industry, Chris prides himself on his ability to find compelling investment opportunities in companies of all kinds, usually before the crowd. As he stresses at the National Investor, you can get information anywhere, but from Chris you get knowledge. And it is that knowledge he first gets from his research into companies, often visiting projects all over North and South America that he is privileged to pass on. Now, to learn about today's company in the spotlight, here's Chris.
Welcome in, folks. Chris Temple, editor and publisher of the National Investor, back with you again. And in today's company spotlight, we have, I guess we could say, an oldie for me, Seabridge Gold. Seabridge is listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol SA, as you see here on the screen. On the Toronto Stock Exchange, it is under the symbol SEA. I've followed Seabridge almost since the company was started back in 1999 by the man I'll bring on here as my guest in a minute, Rudi Fronk. He is the executive chairman and a co-founder of Seabridge back when. Fortuitously, and this was certainly planned that way, I think, at the end of what he and his partner and co-founder Jim Anthony believed was the looming end in those years of the secular bear market that we had had in gold for nearly 20 years. And time, of course, has proven Rudi and Jim correct in that. Now, before we get into any details at all, you know the drill here on the screen. First off is Seabridge's own disclosure statement. Rudi and or myself might be making forward-looking statements, so we wanted to let you know that. And then here next on the screen, you will see from our own publication, my disclosure. Seabridge has been a recommendation of mine on and off for a number of years. I'm going to explain how that has changed in the last couple of years. And subsequent to my recommending Seabridge to my paid members at the National Investor, the company from time to time, including recently for in part the purposes of this interview and an upcoming special report, they have hired National Investor Publishing to do copywriting, media, propaganda work, if you will. And so we wanted to let you know about that as well. Part of that is very shortly going to be an update to what's been a kind of a provocative and fairly well-traveled special issue of mine entitled "This is Not Your Father's Gold Market." There's a lot of things that are different today than a generation ago when gold first had a big run after being unleashed in the 1970s. And we're going to talk about that. You'll see more about Seabridge and a few other of my recommended companies in that issue. If you're not already on my mailing list to get that, just drop me a note and you'll receive that. Finally, before I bring Rudi on, I wanted to also make sure that you had Seabridge's website. We're going to hit the high points of the company today, most of all, of course, their flagship KSM project up in British Columbia. But folks, this is a company that has several other exploration assets that for any smaller company would be their flagship. And a lot of people, incredibly to this day, still don't realize that Seabridge in the year 2021 has so many irons in the fire, as well as, most importantly, I think for near-term purposes, they've brought KSM to a place where the economics and the growing stature of this, one of the largest undeveloped gold and copper projects in the entire world, is something that really can't be ignored much longer. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you my old friend Rudi Fronk, again, the executive chairman and co-founder of Seabridge. Rudi, welcome.
Great to be back. Great to see you again, Chris. It's been a long time.
Too long. It's good that we're going to start getting out and see each other one again. I think the last time we saw one another was the year ago, this past winter, when you invited me to be with you down at John Duty's conference in Florida. And that was about one of the last things that either one of us went to before everything started getting shut down.
It was the last thing. The world shut down a week after that, I believe.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get to do that again and see each other in person before long. Real quick, Rudi, before I get into KSM and what prompted you and Jim to start Seabridge and what specifically was the attraction to you of this project. I wanted to stress something to folks. You know, once upon a time, Seabridge had the reputation, incredibly, it still does with some, as being a great trading vehicle in the gold space. I even embraced it once upon a time as this. You know, there is not a company that you can find in this space that, when you look at the amount of shares it has issued over time, has done a better job for company its size of every single time they issue shares. When they raise money, they end up with even more gold, and in the recent times, copper per share. I've shared a couple of the slides on the screen as I've said that. So what would happen in the past is that people, myself included, when you thought gold was in a downswing for a while, it's going to be several months before it goes up again, you sell Seabridge. When the market gets back down, you think gold's going to turn, you buy it, because Seabridge has always had one of the highest betas for any company. But that story has changed. It's a far deeper story than that. Not only is KSM one of the largest undeveloped gold projects in the world, but also in the recent past, it's become one of the largest copper projects nearing development in the world. And that has completely transformed KSM. It's transformed the company. They've added several other major exploration plays. And it's why this is the kind of a company that you no longer trade. This is something that, if you even half believe in the long-term bona fides for gold or copper, let alone both of them, this is one of the companies you want at the core of your portfolio. So Rudi, back in '99, when you and Jim started a company, you believed that we were going to have these kind of days to come. But tell us specifically about KSM. What first turned you on to that particular project as being the anchor for Seabridge?
Well, a lot of my team early on came from Placer Dome, and Placer Dome is the company we purchased KSM from. So they already had a deep knowledge of the asset. KSM, when we bought this asset from Placer Dome, there were two known deposits, the Kerr deposit and the Sulphurets deposit. And those two deposits had about 3 million ounces of gold and 2 billion pounds of copper. But based on the knowledge that our team had, there was a lot of exploration upside. Never in our wildest dreams, however, did we think we would find what we found. I mean, you look at KSM today, between the 5 deposits we now have there, we have 142 million ounces of gold and 51 billion pounds of copper.
Good night. Nobody else pretty much on the planet can say that. And one of the, you said 5 deposits, and a key part of this, folks, for the economics is the Snowfield acquisition that you made not long ago. But before we get to that, along the way, you took those 2 initial finds, you added a couple more to them. But how was it that copper came into the mix? Because one of the knocks, and every now and then I'll talk to someone about Seabridge, say, oh yeah, it's a huge project up there next to Pretium in BC, but the grades aren't that great. It's going to take a lot to engineer it, and blah, blah, blah. But man, you have found better grades of gold, number one. Number two, adding the copper to it. So when you look at today's numbers, and drilling along the line as you've done, the richest one gold-wise, is it Deep Kerr?
No,
or Iron Cap?
Gold-wise, it's actually what we just acquired from Pretium, Snowfield.
Oh, Snowfield, okay.
But copper-wise, it's Deep Kerr or Iron Cap. They're pretty similar in terms of metal values.
Okay. Now, even before you acquired Snowfield, you bought that from Pretium, was it a little over a year ago?
This past December, not even a year.
Well, not even a year. Okay, so you acquired that from Pretium, and that gave you higher grade material. It's near surface. You're going to be coming out, I think, at some point with an updated economic study as to how the pecking order of all this will work. But even before Snowfield, the latest numbers that you had put out for KSM generally just astonished me. And for those people who still think that Seabridge somehow or other is this low grade thing that needs a much higher threshold for metal prices and so forth, tell us what your all-in sustaining costs would be if you were to crank this up using copper as a credit.
Yeah, so we've done a number of studies, 2 that have been publicly disclosed. The first was the Prefeasibility Study. That is the basis for how we got the project permitted. That also defines our proven and probable reserves of gold and copper. And that study, using 275 copper, had an all-in cost of production, including all of the capital, the sustaining capital, the closure costs, and the operating costs, net of copper credits, of about $670 an ounce, all in. Subsequent to that, though, we did a further study to show what the project could look like by incorporating a deep Kerr and lower iron cap, basically taking 1 billion tons of lower grade material out of the mine plan and replacing it with 1 billion tons of higher grade material from deep Kerr and lower iron cap. And the all-in cost of production on that mine plan dropped by over $600 an ounce, essentially down to zero.
So the gold essentially is free and paid for with the copper, just to rough it.
Yeah, it's a function of how you want to develop this asset. For a gold company that wants to focus on gold, they probably will focus on Mitchell, sulfurettes, and Snowfields, because those have the highest gold grades. For a copper company that wants to go after the copper, you'll always start mining at Mitchell first, because that's where you get the best bang for the buck up front and get a quick recoupment of your capital. But then you'll probably develop the underground block caves at Iron Cap and Deep Kerr.
Right. Now, what's incredible and really important for people to understand about this, again, is that you really, under a lot of people's noses, without, in my view, at least, people paying enough attention. I was pounding the table on your stock back when you dropped under $10 again a couple of years ago, saying this is buying and hold. This isn't something you trade anymore. And again, it's because you've got that copper component now. We've got in the world peak gold. I think sometimes it's a little bit overstated, but still, as with most all resources in mining, the easy stuff was gotten years ago. And yes, with modern technology and practices, you can mine lower grade material, but it is lower grade material and there's not enough being found. And that's several times the case, I think, with copper. And I think you really put yourself, Rudi, in the catbird seat when now you can market KSM as one or the other, or if not both. It's not just a gold asset. So, you're going to be doing an updated PFS at some point, aren't you?
Yeah, so with the acquisition of Snowfield comes along with it, I think, 26 million ounces of measured and indicated gold resources and another 9 million ounces in the inferred category. Real close to surface, good gold grades, very, very low strip ratio. So we actually believe that an updated pre-feas will not only blow away the pre-feas we have out there, but also be as good, if not better, than the study we showed with the higher grade copper. So that study is underway, and we expect to have that done sometime next year.
Nice. And needless to say, with majors in the world looking for future sources of gold and copper both, I would suspect that there's going to be some, at least, talking going on with some of them. Tell us, and I realize that you can't divulge anything publicly, in this conversation. It's not already public, Rudi. But I think it's fair to say that you've got some people knocking on the door, isn't it?
Yeah, look, we've been very open with the announcement that we're looking to bring a joint venture partner in to co-develop this asset. It's well beyond our capabilities. A company with a market cap of $1.5 billion shouldn't be building $5 billion plus projects. It's just too big of a leap. And from our perspective, there's maybe 7 companies in the world that have the technical, financial, and social wherewithal to build a project like KSM. Those are the ones we've engaged with. We have turned down a number of proposals over the years. Our view is we only get to do this once. It's got to be with the right partner on the right terms. And I think what's working in our favor now is not only what the project will show as a result of adding Snowfield, but also, as you mentioned, you're in a world now where the industry is running out of reserves. They need new projects. And in a world where copper is going to become an important metal going forward because of the green energy initiatives. And then last but not least, it's the amount of money that these big companies are now generating from their existing projects that, yeah, they need to return capital to shareholders, but they also need to think about their future beyond the next 10 years. And that's where KS fits in.
Well, for sure. And there's not an asset like it in the world, in a jurisdiction like Canada, really. And I suspect at some point we'll hear some news down the road, whether it's before or after your next PFS, who knows, but the clock, I think, is certainly ticking. Moving on from that, folks, and again, I encourage you to spend some time afterwards on Seabridge's website. We can only hit the high points today, But as I said in introducing Rudi, Seabridge also has got several other exploration projects, any one of which can be an anchor for a smaller company. The one I want to hit, maybe not in order of importance necessarily, is the one in closest proximity, is Iskut, which you recently announced you're drilling on. You acquired that much more recently than KSM. It's not too terribly far away. That's got some intriguing geology. Give us a quick Cliff Notes version of Iskut and what's going on there, Rudi.
Yeah, so at Iskut, we did acquire a public company called Snip Gold. I think we issued about 700,000 shares to buy them in 2016. We started exploration. There was earlier stage, although there was a small resource that came with that, the Bronson Slope, that had just over 2 million ounces of gold and about 500 million pounds of copper. So not much different than when we acquired KSM from Placer Dome. But what we're excited about is the exploration potential. I think what our team has done best over the years is finding gold. I mean, we have found more gold over the past 15 years than any of the big companies, including the majors, and at far less expenditure. And at Iskut, we see another KSM opportunity. It's the same age of mineralization, the same structural elements, and the same rocks. So we're now into a drill program there where last year we actually hit gold and copper on what we believe is the outer edges of a big gold copper porphyry system. And right now we're drilling, vectoring hopefully down into where the heart of the system could be, and hoping to make a significant discovery there with gold and copper.
And roughly, and we all know that things can be delayed, but roughly when do you think you might have some assays from this current drill program out?
Probably, assay labs, you never know. they promise you 2 or 3 week turnaround time, and then you find out it's a month to 6 weeks. So I think comfortably though, by early Q4, mid Q4, we should have some results out on what we're seeing there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Moving on, another project. I think that your most recent acquisition was Three Aces, wasn't it?
Yeah, that came to us.
Portfolio?
That came to us at the height of COVID. We actually closed that deal, I think, in April of last year,
Right.
buying 100% of this asset from Predator Gold. We've been following that asset for a long time. At one point in time, in fact, Three Aces generated a market cap to Predator Gold in excess of $200 million Canadian. And because of COVID and their need for capital, we were able to step in and buy this asset for 300,000 common shares when our shares were trading at about $10 a share each. And also we granted them a 0.5% royalty. What intrigues us about Three Aces is, number one, mineralization is right near surface. There's over 300 holes there already along 35 kilometers of strike length. And more than a third of those holes intersected gold of better than 5 grams per ton. We think it's a big system. We think there's actually parallel structures to where they drilled on previously. And we think it has a tremendous potential to generate lots of ounces close to surface at very high grades.
Now, correct me if my recollection isn't right here, Rudi, but you kind of had some eyes on that for a while, even before you did that deal, didn't you?
Yeah, so the CEO, the founder of Predator Gold was Bill Sheriff, a guy I've known for a long time. When Bill picked up that project, he's known me quite well for years, and he asked whether we can actually get him some technical help on the asset. So our head of exploration, Bill Threlkill, got involved with Predator Gold, helping look at the opportunities there and putting together programs to generate news flow.
Well, and what's interesting to me about that is that, in the Yukon, which is where Three Aces is, and on kind of the southeastern part of that territory, it's really an up and coming jurisdiction. I get a lot of the publications from Yukon centric mining alliance up there. There's other projects up there that I've been following, and we're not too far off from that being like one of the middle provinces almost, as far as the infrastructure and things like that. So it's important that you're in a good area for that as well. Specifically, what are your near-term plans, Rudi, for Three Aces?
Yeah, so Three Aces, we finished the first round of geophysics, identifying new structure that hasn't been tested yet. We hope to follow up with additional geophysics here soon. And then based on, we've applied for a large program for drilling, and hopefully we get our permits in time this year to start drilling there this year. If we don't get it this year, it goes into next year. but the opportunity doesn't go away. In the meantime, we're engaging quite closely with the First Nations there, like we did at KSM early on, to introduce who we are, talk about our plans going forward, and to engage with them and how we operate as a company.
Neat. Now, even though the Yukon is kind of in the ascendance as far as not being as remote and looked at that way as it once was, you have one other major asset that is kind of on the back burner that is a bit more remote, that being Courageous Lake. And that has several million ounces of reserves of gold, doesn't it, Rudi?
Yeah, it actually has 6.5 million ounces of reserves at better than 2 grams per ton in an open pit configuration.
Okay. And now what if anything is on the drawing board for that? I know that it's certainly not the highest priority for the company right now, partly because of the location. Is that something that you might monetize? Might you take another bite at it if the metals markets continue to be strong?
Yeah, we're looking at all our options there. You know, when I look at Courageous Lake, I don't think it generates any value into our share price today. People have forgotten about it. Although before we did any work at KSM, Courageous Lake on its own generated a market cap of over $500 million back in 2004, 2005. So we're excited about it. It's a big project. It is remote, but there have been successful mines just to the north of us, Diavik and Ikati on the diamond side. So we're working with a financial advisor now to look at the potential sale, or perhaps we retain a stream like we've done in other assets, perhaps a joint venture, or getting back into it, working on it ourselves. Perhaps after we get a deal done on KSM, that might be something we can go back into and start to advance and be successful down the road like we expect to be at KSM.
Neat. Well, certainly not burning a hole in your pocket. It's there. It's an asset that you don't have any trouble hanging on to, and we'll see what happens. You know, I want to spend a few minutes on, I think to me, the most telling story of the last few years, especially for Seabridge, and that is your Snowstorm acquisition in Nevada. You and I have talked countless times over the years about the market generally, about in some ways the black eye that the gold sector has had. You know, you've got a lot of companies that are out there, little fledgling exploration companies that really don't have, in my view, a lot of them good assets, never did, but they can go to shows and raise money and put on a lot of fluff, and those are what we call lifestyle companies. But even among the producers and a lot of the advanced exploration companies, you see time after time, and they're not all bad, some of them end up okay, but speaking in general terms, a lot of companies blow out their share structure. You end up with billions of shares outstanding for some of these small companies without a whole heck of a lot to show for it. And, you know, we talked at the beginning, and we'll put it up here again too, about how Seabridge has done better than any of your peers in building wealth. And every single time it seems that you raise money, oftentimes it's at above the market price, as I've noticed over the years, and yet you're ending up with more gold and copper per share than you started with. And that came to the notice of a man that anybody who follows the gold market knows, John Paulson, the well-known hedge fund manager. He was a part owner of this big Snowstorm project in Nevada with some other people. And as I remember the story, and you can refresh all of our memories, Rudi, the people who had it before threw a bunch of money at it, didn't really know what they were doing geologically. And John Paulson was looking for a home, looking for a company that was not committing the mistakes in blowing out share structures and issuing too much and so forth. And he decided that the best home for Snowstorm, that's the best run company, and with people who've got some sense when it comes to knowing how to explore this thing, was you guys. So first of all, and it's not the first time I've said it, congratulations that you were singled out by one of the industry's biggest and most notable critics for that. But give us a sense of Snowstorm, because this, I think, for people even who follow Seabridge somewhat, is going to prove to be a sleeper and could be a huge surprise down the road.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we're excited about Snowstorm. We think we have an elephant by the tail there. Yeah, so just a brief history on Snowstorm. It was, you know, project's been around a while. There's a lot of tertiary cover there, so you have to go through a lot of volcanics to get down the zones of interest. John Paulson owned half of it. The other half was owned by another well-known investor. They actually tried to sell it before we bought it a few years back. We actually put a bid in that was turned down. And then John actually went ahead and bought out his partner and then brought it back to market in 2017. And that's when we stepped in and bought 100% of it. And you're right. I mean, you look at where this project is situated, it's situated on the intersection of the three most prolific gold belts in Nevada, and just north of the two of the biggest mines in the new Barrick Nevada joint venture, namely Twin Creeks and Turquoise Ridge. We believe we have that type of opportunity at Snowstorm, but John looked at it, okay, I can probably sell this to a major for cash, or I can double down on this and sell it to a company that will do its justice in terms of exploration. I'm willing to take common shares, and even if this project doesn't pan out, I've got the upside for what they do on their other assets. So John sold it to us for, I think, 700,000 shares back in 2017. And today, his most recent quarterly filing, John actually now owns over 2 million shares of Seabridge. So not only did he take the shares at that point in time, but he also more than doubled down by buying shares, above and beyond what we issued to him when we purchased the asset.
I did not know that previously. That's good to know. I know that he's got, so in total, he's got what, 2.5% to 3%, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. He's owned for just over 2 million shares of the company.
Well, it speaks well, obviously, to you guys, Rudi, when a guy like that, who, again, he actually started a watchdog group, for those of you that don't know this, a few years ago, trying to, call the industry to account, even producing companies, the majors that were blowing money on silly projects, and even when gold prices were high, they weren't really delivering much to their shareholders. And in the last couple or 3 years, we've seen a major turnaround in the entire industry. Not perfect, but a whole hell of a lot better than it had been. And this guy deserves a lot of the credit for it. So I think, Rudi, and again, congratulations and kudos to you, that a guy like this, who is one of the best tire kickers and I think constructive critics of the industry, has really bet on you guys. That speaks well. Lastly, as far as near-term plans for Snowstorm, I know you've got still a lot of somewhat greenfield work to do, but are we going to see even more drilling start to ramp up there at some point as you start to hone in on targets?
Yeah, we actually just started drilling there last week. So we have our third program underway there now. The first program we had there 2 years ago was designed to just confirm that the structures that run through Twin Creeks and Turquoise Ridge continue into Snowstorm, which we confirmed that they did. And also we had the same rock package. Last year's program was to show that there was gold in that system, and we confirmed that. And this year we hope to vector into some of the higher grade material. I mean, this is quite honestly like trying to find a needle in the haystack, but when you find it, you're glad you do. I mean, the average grade at Turquoise Ridge that they're mining today is, I think, 13 grams per ton. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that type of mineralization. And, finding it right next to two of the biggest mines in Nevada is not a bad place to have a new discovery.
No, and it makes sense that it's there. We've all heard the old adage, the best place to find gold is where it's already been found, and in the shadow of other head frames and mines. So you can't be in a much better zip code than that. So a lot of exciting stuff, Rudi. I'm glad to be a shareholder also. I wish I had as much in the game, or could have as much as John or you, but I'll settle for what I can afford right now. But this is a great story. And folks, in an industry where you've still got, in my opinion, way too many exploration companies out there with marginal projects, marginal prospects, they take a lot of the oxygen out of the room in some venues. You cannot have, as a core holding, better advanced exploration, and in the case of KSM, something we can probably start to call it more so development stage project in your portfolio as a core, if you again believe in gold and copper. One last thing, and coming back quickly, Rudi, to KSM to underscore it, there really is not a whole heck of a lot left either. Let's say, just for sake of discussion, that you have a joint venture partner potentially, or acquire, or whoever it might be, that's getting more and more serious about things. You've got almost all the permits that would be needed to get that thing off the ground at this point, don't you?
That is correct. We went through the environmental assessment process successfully, both provincially and federally. And then we have the first 2.5 years of construction permits already in our pockets. And then on top of that, we also have cheap power close by. We've now secured contractual agreements with BC Hydro. We'll be able to buy hydropower off the grid for about 5 cents US per kilowatt hour. We have major road networks close by and 2 ports that allow us to bring supplies in and take concentrate out. So KSM has a lot going for it, just above and beyond just the metal we have there.
Yeah, well, it's not going to stay that way forever, folks. And I can't stress enough, do your homework on Seabridge. KSM at some point is going to be one of the developed assets that everybody talks about, I believe. And you really can't do better again than have Seabridge as one of your core holdings. So Rudi, thanks again for taking some time today, and look forward to being able to see you again one of these days before too many more months go by.
Chris, always great to catch up, and I look forward to our next encounter.
Thank you for joining us today on Company Spotlight with Chris Temple. Again, if you aren't already on his mailing list, make sure to write him at chris@nationalinvestor.com and ask to join.